I started collecting Pokémon cards somewhere between late 2009 and early 2011, sometime around when the Platinum, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, or Black and White expansions were in rotation. Collecting cards back in the day was always a fun hobby, especially since my brother also collected them, and we would always get them at the same time and trade them with each other a lot. I still enjoy opening Pokemon cards to this day, so on the surface it seems I've enjoyed the hobby ever since I started collecting over 10 years ago. That's not the case though, because as a dumb kid, I made plenty of mistakes over the years of my card collection that essentially ruined it completely. It all led up to one point just a few years ago where I made one of the biggest mistakes of my life. Allow me to explain this story. I collected during the late stages of the Gen 4 era of Pokemon expansions, and became even more interested in the hobby when Black and White came around. Following that, I reached my highest admiration for the TCG when the XY expansion was a thing, but as Sun and Moon rolled around, I began to lose interest, despite loving the Sun and Moon games and still being a big fan of the games at that point. In between the time period I just explained, there were minor points where I stopped collecting every now and then, but I always found myself coming back. What I want to do now is explain the fates of as many of my old cards as I can to show why I'm very happy that I now understand the value and potential of things. My stupid Pokemon card antics all started with one big thing. I never sleeved any of my cards back in the day, so they were all getting damaged slowly to start, including ultra rares. On top of that, in my early years of collecting, there were many cards, none of which were ultra rares, luckily, that I drew on, cut into pieces, folded in half, and there's even one that I intentionally threw into a creek. It was a Togepi card, I'm pretty sure it was the one from Undaunted. So that's where my unfortunate treatment of cards began. I would occasionally do stupid things and ruin cards for no reason. As time moved on, I began to collect even more, and I began getting ultra rares in my collection. My harsh treatment continued. The earliest example of this that I can think of is what I did to this secret rare shiny Entei card from Call of Legends. This pictures me pulling it from a pack over 10 years ago. I didn't understand that this was a rare card at the time. I simply knew that it was special in some way because it had a legendary Pokemon on it, and that was essentially how I judged the greatness of cards back then. Regardless, I still ruined this card for no reason. First, I cut the corner off of the card. Then I later proceeded to give it to my cousin for free. He eventually gave it back to me, but I then proceeded to lose it, and I've never found it since then. As far as I could find, this card is worth about $80 now. The next big event where I lost a special card happened sometime around 2011 or so, just like with my Entei. My mom got my brother and I Ancient Mew cards, and I kept mine for a while until eventually I did one of the stupidest things possible to it. Essentially, since the card looked cool and not like a normal Pokemon card, I cut it into multiple pieces to turn it into a puzzle, and eventually threw it out because it wasn't a card anymore. It looks like this card is worth around $40 now. I can't remember exactly when this one happened, but I think this one was around 2012, as it involves this Cresselia EX Full Art from Boundaries Crossed, which is from 2012. Essentially, I traded it with a card from my brother's friend, and I don't remember what that card was, but I do remember that it was a really bad trade, or it must have been, because eventually I wanted my card back, but my brother wasn't friends with that kid anymore, so there was no way for me to get it back. That card looks like it's about $30 or $40 now. These next stories aren't about me losing cards, but about me almost losing cards. One time in kindergarten, I gave someone this Reshiram Hollow promo. Now this one's not an ultra rare, but it's still a pretty interesting story. So this person I gave the card to kept it for about 5 years and gave it back to me in 5th grade. I luckily still have this card, but it looks like this now. Next up, there was this time where I pulled this Mega Gallade EX Full Art out of a Roaring Skies pack when it came out back in 2015. And one day I decided to bring it to school with me and show everybody at recess. Long story short, somebody stole it from me and started to run around with it, but I Luckily got it back eventually. However, this Gallade's story would not end so peacefully, but I'll get back to it later. Around 2016 or 2015, I sold two special cards to a friend of mine. One was the Mega Charizard X from Flashfire, which is probably the chase card of that set, and I pulled that when that set came out a year or two before this event. That card has its own story to tell, so I'll explain that first. Essentially, the day I got that card, I showed my friends the cards I got from the pack I got it from, and we battled with those cards on the sidewalk. Like on a sidewalk made of rough rocks, not good terrain to put cards on, including the Charizard. We used that one as well, so that definitely damaged them a good bit. And I later lost the card, but then found it, and then I lost it a second time, and found it again. But anyway, I sold this card alongside a Mega Magnetric EX that someone gave me to a friend of mine for $40 total, and immediately used that money to buy a Mega Blaziken EX box, which was a thing at the time. And of the multiple packs in that box, I got a Raichu break out of it. So, I see people selling that Charizard card today for over $100, and the Magnetric is about $5 or $10 now, so, oops. The last story I have of me losing an ultra rare card to a specific event was from a time that I really can't remember. The reason I say that is because it happened to a Shaman EX full art I had. The problem is, I literally can't remember which one it was. It was either the one from Roaring Skies, Legendary Treasures, or Next Destinies, so this was either in 2015, 2013, or 2012. This is going to sound unbelievable, but what happened is that I was at Kmart one day. I don't even think that place still exists, but I was at Kmart, and I got a pack of cards, which I opened as we were leaving the store, and it had one of these Shaman cards in it. But as we were leaving the parking lot of the store, I somehow dropped the card out of the window of my mom's car as she was driving, and as she was doing so, she drove over the card. Now, of course, this wouldn't have damaged the card too much as it's just a paper-thin piece of cardboard, but my stupid child self decided to leave it there assuming it was done for, and that was the end of that. All three of those shamans are around $10 or $15 now, but it's still a sad loss, considering I could have literally opened the car door and picked it up off the ground instead of leaving it there. I'm sure there's plenty of other examples of me treating cards poorly and losing them in horrible ways throughout the years, but these are the ones I can think of off the top of my head. And now there's the climax of the story. There's a reason I said I eventually made a massive mistake with my cards, and that I lost interest in the TCG when Sun and Moon were a thing. It started when the X and Y expansion was coming to a close in late 2016. My friend gave a bunch of kids in my class packs of cards as a Christmas present. I think this was in about 5th grade, by the way, and I didn't pull any ultra rares out of it, so for some reason at that specific moment, I decided I was losing interest in the TCG. My brother gave me this Landorus full art around the same time, and I was angry when he did so even though he gave it to me for free. I quickly began to hate the Pokemon TCG. I guess I was thinking I was too old for it, which doesn't make sense because I still liked the games. But I still ended up getting a few more TCG related things, which happened in December of 2017. I got the Solgaleo GX box, Lunala GX box, and some Crimson Invasion packs. So that was when the Sun and Moon expansion began. But that was essentially the last time I ever really opened packs for quite some time. For about 2 years, my collection was dormant, leading up to the summer of 2019, where I made my big mistake. At that point, my collection had over 2,000 normal cards and over 40 ultra and secret rare cards. At the end of that summer, both my brother and I decided to sell huge chunks of our collections in hopes to make some money. That was not the case for me. If it was, I wouldn't be making this video. I ended up selling the majority of my collection in 2 different auctions on eBay. One contained around 2,000 normal cards, and the other contained around 40 ultra rares and secret rares. I told my parent to set the starting price of the auction to something high for each of them, but they started them at $10 each. So, long story short, I didn't even make $100 out of the whole collection. If I sold each of those ultra rares individually today, I could make that amount multiple times, probably, and I'd still have all of the normal cards left. I'm still very upset with the fact that I did this, as obviously I lost so much potential money, but honestly, if I could get those cards back, I would cherish them and not sell them. I only ended up keeping about 1 or 2 hundred normal cards and just 2 ultra rares. One ultra rare was a Marowak Break, which I only kept because I had 3. The other was this Flareon EX Full Art that I only kept because I took a random card out of the stack before listing them on eBay, and it was that Flareon. And I wanted to keep at least one, and that was my way of choosing. The Marowak just tagged along because I had 3 of it, as I said. Luckily, in February of 2020, I got back into collecting cards, and I've been addicted again ever since. I don't know how big my collection is now, but it's certainly recovered as far as size goes since that fateful day in 2019. I now have 70 ultra rares and secret rares, so I've definitely replenished as far as that type of card goes. Anyway, that's my story of how I lost my childhood collection of Pokemon cards, and I regret everything I did. Now I'm going to show every ultra rare and secret rare that I sold when I sold them 3 years ago, or at least the ones I can remember. Well, that's my story. I was a pretty stupid kiddo, but luckily nowadays I have no plans on destroying or selling any of my cards, so that's good. But it seems for the most part, if you're into the Pokemon TCG, you're either a stupid kid like I was, who's just gonna destroy their cards and not treat them well, or you're like a 30-year-old guy who's in it for the money and the chase cards. And actually, here comes one of them now. Do you want to buy these cards off of me by chance? No, it's garbage. Alright, fair. I'll throw in this one just for you. Is that an underage girl? Yeah, why? You know we 30-year-old Pokemon collectors like our cards with 10-year-old females on them, right? How about you hand your collection over?